They tipped the crimson glass onto his chest, and the room laughed as if their applause could drown the truth. The crystal chandeliers glittered above a sea of polite faces, the air thick with perfume and the soft clink of silverware, and Marcus Vale stood at the edge of it all like a photograph that didn't belong. A navy suit that didn't shout but somehow made everyone uncomfortable because it refused to register on their scale of value. He had walked in steady, hands in his pockets, invitation card tucked into his palm like a quiet badge, watching the room with the patient sort of attention that makes people assume you're simple until you move. Staff had glanced twice and smirked. A bellman had assumed he was service and stepped aside when the black seal on his card proved him right, and the murmurs in the corners were small, deliciously cruel. Tonight the logo on every screen spun. Asterion Dynamics, the 800 million partnership that promised to tilt markets and fund futures, and the host smiled the kind of smiles that lived off attention. But when Evelyn Mercer, satin and shine, pointed at Marcus and called him out with a tilt of her chin, the room took her cue like predators at a feeding. She offered a wine glass as a sneer. He did not reach for it, and her husband Paul made a show of pouring the red over him as if to brand him with humiliation. Phones rose, the pour caught the light, laughter rippled, and Marcus felt the warmth of the wine spread across his chest, a dark geography marred against neat fabric. He touched the stain with 2 fingers, wiped nothing away, and turned without a word, leaving the ballroom to its buzz, moving through the hallway with the same quiet gait he had used to enter. Outside, the night air cut clean beneath the hotel's marquee. His thumb found a number, a voice responded, and in a few low sentences the scaffolding around their billions collapsed. He did not gloat. He did not shout. He walked until the city light pooled around him and the first tremors of fallout trembled through the glass doors behind him like an aftershock. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now let's begin. Inside the ballroom, panic arrived like a blackout. Screens blinked, music halted mid-phrase, and servers paused with trays in hand as a terse directive unfurled through private lines. Pull the offer, freeze the accounts, suspend the signing. The host's practiced warmth curdled into alarm. Investors swiped at phones and watched colors turn bad. Red warnings, frozen transfers, emergency memos. Clips of the wine splash slid from handset to handset until the moment that Evelyn and Paul had staged to humiliate them became the clearest, costliest proof that the quiet man they had ridiculed was nobody's afterthought. Someone in the corner whispered the name and the room exhaled as if a truth had finally hit the surface. Marcus Vale owned the partner company, the mystery investor behind the audacious offer. Paul's smile thinned into disbelief and then something heavier, a cold responsibility settling over his features, while Evelyn tried to press composure into her voice and failed. They had built their evenings on the assumption that indignities could be distributed like garnish, nothing that ever came due. Now, with phones ablaze and partners pulling away, the ledger turned. Marcus did not watch their ruin assemble. He had never wanted spectacle. He had wanted steadiness, unseen but decisive, which is why he had chosen to enter like a shadow, why he had worn a suit that did not announce itself, and why he had allowed the moment of humiliation to be what it was, an unvarnished reveal of character. As the night stretched into frantic calls and the hotel's lobby filled with the sounds of broken promises and scrambling executives, he stood on a quiet corner with the city's breath on his face and felt the small, clean satisfaction that comes when truth and consequence meet. In the hours that followed, headlines turned their faces from celebration to scandal. Executives resigned, shares thinned, and legal teams moved like tidewater, cutting off a future that had been arrogantly assumed. People scrolled and judged, some with righteous glee, others with a new, shaky humility. Marcus watched none of it live. He let the world wring itself out and kept walking through streets that knew him only as a man who kept his shoulders level and his voice low. When Evelyn and Paul arrived at his door with bruised statements and softer pleas, the contrast between their frantic, makeup-smeared faces and the quiet of his little row house felt like a coda. They said they were sorry, they said they had been wrong, they bought their penitent words with the currency of panic. Marcus listened while they stammered apologies about not knowing, about mistaking charity for weakness, about the cost they now faced. He let them speak their wrongs into the room because sometimes confession needs a soundscape, and then he offered them the one thing their trembling hands could not retrieve: truth without theatrics. He told them that the damage had not started with the wine but with a system that taught them to weigh people by convenience, that the public humiliation was simply its most visible symptom. He did not force pity. He did not perform mercy. He said calmly that the deal was terminated, that trust had been severed, and that some doors, once closed, should remain closed so people learn the cost of casual cruelty. As they left, shoulders bowed under the weight of a lesson they had never wanted to pay, Marcus stepped to his window and watched the street where dawn creased the sky. He felt no triumph, only a sober kind of grief for the way power had been spent like spare change and for the small, quiet dignity that had been denied a man in a crowd. The city's conversation shifted quickly. Some called it justice, others called it reputational risk, a few whispered about theatrical revenge, but what lingered beneath the headlines was simpler and more human. The idea that kindness and respect are built in the small transactions, the tiny choices to see another person. For weeks, Marcus continued his life with the same low profile. He met with community leaders, directed resources toward projects that repaired what arrogance had broken, and quietly supported people who never asked for cameras. Evelyn and Paul found themselves in the long work of rebuilding more than a company, rebuilding character, and in the slow hush after their fast fall they began to listen when a subordinate spoke, to notice when a server's eyes dropped. It was an imperfect grace, stretching and hesitant, but it was something like repair. Near the end of that long arc, when interviews had calmed and the city had learned a new caution, listeners messaged and said that the story felt like a small miracle. Strangers thanked him for a lesson in restraint. Colleagues called to ask how he bore the cost of watching humiliation unfold without retaliating. He always said the same thing in the same low voice. He did not want to be an avenger. He wanted to be a mirror. If the story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment, and tell us where you're watching from so we can appreciate you. The last image is simple. Marcus walking away down a lane where the morning softened house fronts and a neighbor's dog lifted its head to greet him. He paused, nodded to no one and everyone, and continued on. He never raised a toast for the ruin he had caused. He never kept a ledger of pain inflicted. What stayed with him was smaller and more fierce. The knowledge that dignity costs nothing to give and everything to take away. The certainty that a single quiet action can change an evening and sometimes a life. And the gentle understanding that our small acts toward others are the true measures of wealth. The city moved on. People grew kinder in the ways that civilization sometimes forgets. And in the hush of a new day, Marcus Vale walked home with a soft certainty in his chest. Because kindness always wins.